The town of Oakidge lies nestled among the southern hills of Georgia, where red dirt roads win their way to quaint wooden houses and vast open fields. The air here is always fresh, carrying the scent of grass and the gentle clinking of wind chimes hanging from front porches. Beneath this tranquil surface, however, runs an undercurrent of unspoken racial prejudice, something the locals rarely mention but everyone feels. In Oakidge, everything has clear boundaries. The cafe for white people sits on Main Street, while the small grocery store for black residents hides in the shanty town behind the Baptist church. Black children never play basketball at the schoolyard unless given permission by the white coach. And when night falls, the sound of country music echoes from the bars, while jazz melodies are quietly hummed only within the small apartments of black families. Among the thousands of people living in Oakidge, Amanda Stokes stands out, not because she's the only black woman working as an engineer at the town's largest construction company, but because she dares to challenge the unspoken rules. But being different has never been easy. That morning, Amanda walked into the Oakidge police station with a tense expression. She wore a long black dress that fell past her knees, formal as if preparing for court. Each step she took on the creaky wooden floor echoed through the room, drawing curious and disdainful glances from a few officers. She stopped at the reception desk where a middle-aged white man sat fiddling with his phone. He glanced up at her, then said impatiently, "What do you want?" Amanda took a deep breath to stay calm. She placed the prepared complaint form on the desk, her voice firm but trembling slightly. "I'm here to file a report about harassment at my workplace." The man picked up the form, skimming it carelessly. A flicker of mockery passed over his eyes as he read the detailed description of the harassment. A white colleague repeatedly making derogatory comments about her skin color and abilities. He set the form down, crossed his arms, and looked directly at Amanda. "Are you sure? It might just be a misunderstanding." "No," Amanda replied firmly. "This isn't the first time. I've tried to resolve it myself, but he won't stop. I need your help." The man sighed, stood up, and called out loudly, "Chief Harlo, we have a visitor." Dan Harlow stepped out of his office, adjusting his pristine white suit jacket. At 55 years old, his silver hair was neatly trimmed and his square, weathered face exuded authority. As the police chief, Dan saw himself as the symbol of power in Oakidge. He believed social order could only be maintained when white people held control. When he saw Amanda, his cold eyes narrowed. He assessed her from head to toe, then sneered, "So this girl thinks she's being treated unfairly?" Amanda clenched her fists, trying to suppress her anger. "I don't think. I know. And I need your support." Dan sat down in his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at her with disdain. "You know, in this town, we usually don't interfere in trivial matters like this. Black people rarely succeed through merit. They often rely on favoritism or—" He paused, smirking mockingly. "Political correctness." Amanda felt her heart race faster. She struggled to remain calm, but her voice still trembled. "You can't deny the truth just because of my skin color. This is a serious issue." Dan chuckled softly, then stood up. "All right, Miss Stokes. I'll look into it, but don't expect too much." He turned his back and walked away, leaving Amanda standing there, filled with anger and helplessness. "It's just another black girl trying to climb too high," Dan thought to himself as he entered his office. He closed the door behind him, sat down in his chair, and sighed. In his mind, images of the old days surfaced, a time when white people dominated every field, from politics to economics. To Dan, Oakidge had once been a paradise, a place where order and tradition were respected above all else. But now everything had changed. Black people were starting to appear in leadership positions in large companies and even in local government. Dan felt as though he was witnessing the collapse of a golden era. If her father were still alive, he would have taught her to know her place, he muttered to himself, recalling the ancient oak tree outside, the same tree where troublemakers were once lynched as a warning. Amanda left the police station, anger and hurt swelling inside her. As she crossed the courtyard, her gaze inadvertently fell upon the towering ancient oak tree. This tree had stood for hundreds of years, bearing witness to countless historical events of the town. It had once been a symbol of strength and resilience, but to Amanda, it represented the pain of the past. She stopped, reaching up to touch the silver bracelet around her neck. The engraved words, "Truth shall set you free," gleamed clearly. It was the last gift her father gave her before he was murdered in the 1960s. She whispered, "Dad, I don't know if I have the strength to keep fighting anymore." The rain began to fall lightly, mingling with the tears streaming down her cheeks. But deep inside Amanda, a small flame still burned, a flame of truth and justice. Amanda drove back to her small apartment on the outskirts of Oakidge. The apartment was on the second floor of an old building, but from the living room window, she could see a panoramic view of tin-roofed houses and lush green trees stretching all the way to the horizon. When she entered, she took off her rain-soaked coat, hung it on a hook near the door, and sat down on the sofa. In the quiet space, Amanda picked up the silver bracelet around her neck, her fingers gently tracing the engraved words, "Truth shall set you free." This bracelet was the last gift her father had given her before he was murdered. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of his unwavering belief in justice and truth. The rain continued to fall outside, forming long streaks that slid down the window pane. Amanda pulled the curtain shut, the warm yellow light in the room highlighting her weary face. She closed her eyes, trying to find some peace amidst the chaos in her mind. Memories of her father came flooding back as vividly as if they had happened yesterday. He had been a prominent civil rights activist in the region, always fighting for the rights of Black people. He often told her, "We fight not for revenge, but so that the children who come after us won't have to cry because of the color of their skin." She remembered a summer afternoon when she was 10 years old and her father had taken her out to the backyard garden. He pointed to the old oak tree by the fence and said, "My daughter, this tree has witnessed so much sorrow. But it also teaches us that no matter how fierce the storms or thunder, its roots must remain firm. Be like this oak tree, strong and unyielding in the face of injustice." Her father had always been Amanda's greatest source of inspiration. But his death when she was 12 left an unfillable void in her heart. His case had never been fully resolved, which is why Amanda had always yearned to uncover the truth. These painful memories made Amanda feel like she couldn't breathe. She stood up, pacing around the room, trying to suppress the panic attack that was slowly overwhelming her. She suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a consequence of years of discrimination and prejudice. Every time she encountered dismissive attitudes like the one today at the police station, she felt as though she were being dragged back into the past. She opened the desk drawer, rummaged through it, and found a box of anti-anxiety medication prescribed by her doctor. But instead of taking the pills, she picked up a small notebook. This was where she jotted down her thoughts and emotions whenever she felt overwhelmed. Amanda scribbled a few lines. "Today, I felt invisible again. He treated me as if I didn't deserve to be heard. But I won't let them extinguish the fire within me. I owe it to Dad." The ringing of the phone interrupted Amanda's thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw Jake's name light up. Jake Thompson was a freelance journalist who had previously written investigative pieces about racial discrimination cases in Georgia. They had met at a social justice seminar and quickly became close. Jake had once written a controversial article criticizing the Black Lives Matter movement, arguing that it was too radical. This had initially made Amanda hesitant to engage with him. But after many conversations, she realized that Jake wasn't entirely against the movement. He simply wanted to understand the issues without blindly following the crowd. "Hi, Amanda," Jake's voice came through the phone, sounding urgent. "I just heard about your complaint. Are you okay?" Amanda took a deep breath before answering, "I'm fine. It's just, everything is a bit difficult." Jake paused for a moment, then said, "I'm investigating an old case in Oakidge. It might be related to your family. Do you have time to meet me?" Amanda hesitated. She wasn't sure if she could fully trust Jake yet, but something in her gut told her he might help her uncover the truth. "All right," she said after a moment's thought. "Let's meet at the corner cafe at 7 o'clock tonight." That evening, Amanda and Jake sat facing each other in a quiet corner of the cafe. The cozy space was bathed in soft yellow light, with the faint aroma of coffee lingering in the air. Amanda ordered a black espresso while Jake chose a cup of herbal tea. So, Amanda began cautiously, "What are you investigating?" Jake pushed a stack of documents toward her. "I uncovered some old files related to your father's case. It seems someone tried to cover up evidence." Amanda flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she examined the photos of the ancient oak tree with the body of a black man hanging from it. In one corner of a photo, she recognized a man in a police uniform. It was Dan Harlow, only much younger. "How did you get these?" Amanda asked, her voice trembling. "I have my sources," Jake replied, his expression serious. "But if we want to uncover the truth, you'll need to be ready to face a lot of pressure." Amanda tightened her grip on the coffee cup, looking straight into Jake's eyes. "I've been ready for a long time." The next day, Amanda returned to the Oakidge police station. But this time, she didn't come alone. She walked into the main hall with an air of confidence and authority, flanked by two federal agents in black suits, each carrying a thick stack of documents. Gone was the black woman who had been dismissed the day before. Today, Amanda wore a long black coat over a sharp business suit, her silver badge gleaming on her chest. She stopped at the reception desk where the same middle-aged man from the previous day sat. When he saw Amanda accompanied by the two agents, his face immediately turned pale. What do you need?" Amanda coldly replied, "I want to see Chief Harlow immediately. This is an official investigation order from the federal level." The man quickly made a call to report, then led Amanda and the two agents into Dan's office. The entire hallway fell silent, save for the rhythmic sound of their leather shoes echoing on the wooden floor. As the door to the office opened, Dan was sitting behind his desk, sipping coffee and staring at his computer screen. He looked up, initially annoyed at being disturbed, but his expression quickly turned to shock when he saw Amanda dressed in her authoritative attire. "Miss Stokes," Dan stammered, his voice trembling. "What's going on?" Amanda stepped forward, slamming her badge onto the desk and speaking clearly, word by word. "I am Federal Inspector Amanda Stokes. I have been assigned to investigate allegations of corruption and procedural violations within your local security forces." She paused for a moment, her piercing gaze locked onto Dan, "and I believe you'll be interested in the content of this investigation." Dan's face turned ashen, his hands trembling so much that he spilled his coffee all over the desk. He tried to remain calm, but his voice betrayed his panic. You can't do this. I helped you file your complaint the other day." Amanda gave a bitter smile. "You didn't even bother reading my complaint. But don't worry, I'll ensure everything is handled according to the law." The two agents stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the desk. One of them announced, "Mr. Harlow, we need all documents related to racial discrimination cases over the past 50 years. Especially those involving the ancient oak tree outside." After leaving Dan's office, Amanda and the team of agents got to work. They requested access to all archived records, from patrol logs to investigation reports. Amanda paid special attention to documents from the 1960s, the time when her father was murdered. In a dusty old room filled with cobwebs, Amanda sat hunched over piles of yellowed papers. She flipped through each page, searching for any details related to her father's death. Suddenly, she froze upon seeing a photograph of the ancient oak tree. Beneath its branches hung the body of a black man, lynched with a rope. In the corner of the photo, she recognized a man in a police uniform, the face unmistakably younger, but identical to Dan Harlow. Amanda's heart raced faster. She handed the photo to one of the agents and said, "This is a major lead. Check who directly handled this case." The agents quickly coordinated, using data analysis technology to cross-reference names in the files. The results shocked Amanda. Dan Harlow hadn't just witnessed the crime, he had actively participated in covering up evidence. Other agents quickly coordinated, using advanced data analysis tools to cross-reference names in the archives. The results left Amanda stunned. Dan Harlow wasn't merely a witness. He had actively participated in concealing evidence. Back in his office, Dan sat huddled on his chair, staring blankly out the window. The image of Amanda wearing her federal inspector's badge haunted him. "It's that black girl from years ago. Is she here to ruin me now?" Dan wondered in despair. He recalled the days of the 1960s when he was still a young officer fresh on the job. Back then, Oakidge was completely controlled by white people, and anyone who dared challenge the status quo was labeled a troublemaker. Amanda's father, a renowned civil rights activist, had become a target for an extremist group. While Dan hadn't directly participated in the murder, he had helped cover up evidence to protect the reputation of the police force. "I was wrong," Dan whispered, tears streaming down his face. But it was too late to undo his mistakes. He knew that if the truth came out, not only his career but his entire life would collapse. That night, Amanda returned to her apartment, bringing along the photograph and some crucial documents. She sat at her desk, organizing the information and pinning notes onto a large whiteboard. Each line of text, each photograph brought her closer to the truth. She looked at her father's portrait placed beside the silver bracelet on her neck. Amanda whispered, "Dad, I won't let them bury the truth. I owe you that." A gentle breeze blew through the open window, rustling the curtains. Amanda felt as though someone was watching over her, perhaps her father's spirit, always supporting her on this journey toward justice. That night, Amanda couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, gazing at the starry sky, letting memories of her father flood her mind. His image appeared vividly, a tall man with a kind smile, always impeccably dressed in a suit, no matter how harsh the weather. He often said that a neat appearance was a way for black people to prove equality in the face of disdainful stares. She remembered one winter evening when she was 10 years old and the entire family gathered around the dinner table. Her father placed his coffee cup down, looked directly into her and her younger sister's eyes, and said, "Life will never be easy for us, but don't let them turn you into victims. We fight not for revenge, but so that future generations won't have to cry because of their skin color." Amanda felt as though those words still echoed in the air, a powerful reminder of her responsibility. She clutched the silver bracelet around her neck, the engraved words, "Truth shall set you free," gleaming under the lamplight. It wasn't just her father's last gift. It was also a promise she had to fulfill. The next morning, Amanda met Jake at the corner cafe. He had been waiting there, holding a thick stack of documents. When she walked in, Jake stood up, pulled out a chair for her to sit. Amanda thanked him with a faint smile, but her eyes still revealed her tension. "I've found more things," Jake said, pushing the documents toward her. "These files are related to an extremist group active in Oakidge during the 1960s. Dan Harlow didn't just cover up evidence, he actively participated in erasing every trace." Amanda flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she read the specific details. Some names on the list sent shivers down her spine. They were people who still held power in this town. She looked up at Jake, her voice trembling. "What do you think we can do with these?" Jake paused for a moment, then replied, "I want to write an investigative article exposing the whole truth. But you need to understand that if it goes public, it'll cause a massive storm. This town isn't ready to face its past." Amanda sighed, massaging her temples. She knew Jake was right, but she also understood that this wasn't the time to be afraid. "Jake," she said firmly, "if we don't act, who will? Those who committed these crimes are still living as if nothing happened." Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness. He knew Amanda was right, but he also feared she would get hurt again. "All right," he said after a moment of thought. "I'll help you. But be careful, Amanda. They won't let you go easily." That afternoon, Amanda drove to the Oakidge cemetery where her father rested. A light drizzle fell, creating a thin mist over the gravestones. She stopped in front of the headstone bearing her father's name, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. Amanda knelt down, placed the flowers on the grave, and whispered, "I won't let them bury the truth, Dad. I promise." She sat there for hours, despite the rain growing heavier. The rain mixed with her tears, streaming down her cheeks. Amanda didn't try to wipe them away. She let her emotions flow freely as a way to release the pressure inside her. Suddenly, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Jake standing there, holding an umbrella. He looked at her with compassionate eyes, then stepped forward, sheltering her with the umbrella. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said softly. Amanda didn't respond, simply standing up and stepping under the umbrella. The two walked along the narrow path in the cemetery in silence, accompanied only by the steady sound of falling rain and the wind rustling through the trees. On the way home, Amanda couldn't stop thinking about Jake. He had been the only one by her side during her toughest moments, but she still couldn't fully trust him. His previous article criticizing the Black Lives Matter movement had once made her feel betrayed, and despite his explanation that it was just a personal perspective, Amanda couldn't forget the pain it caused. "Do you really want to help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice cold. Jake looked at her, his expression serious. "I know I was wrong to write that article, but Amanda, I've learned so much from you. I don't want to just stand by anymore. I want to take action." Amanda was silent for a moment, then said, "All right. But if you betray me again, I won't forgive you." Jake nodded, saying nothing more. The two continued driving in silence, but in Amanda's heart, a decision had been made. She wouldn't let anyone stop her from seeking justice. Early the next morning, the town of Oakidge buzzed with excitement over a special event, the George Floyd Memorial. This was the first time the town had organized such a ceremony, and it drew the attention of hundreds of local residents, both black and white. Posters bearing slogans like "Black Lives Matter" and "No Justice, No Peace" were hung along the streets leading to the central square. Amanda received an invitation to speak at the memorial. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to speaking in front of large crowds, and the painful memories of her father still haunted her daily. But then she thought of everything she had been through: Dan Harlow's dismissive attitude, the concealed documents, and the promise she made to her father that she would fight for justice. She decided to accept the invitation. The ceremony began at sunset when the sky turned a fiery orange-red. The central square was packed with people, from elderly folks sitting on folding chairs to children holding their parents' hands. A small stage was set up where speakers took turns sharing their stories. When it was Amanda's turn, she stepped onto the stage in a formal black suit, the silver bracelet gleaming around her neck. She held the microphone, took a deep breath, and looked out at the crowd. Her voice trembled as she began, "Today, I stand here not only to honor George Floyd but also to remember all those who have fallen because of the color of their skin. They may be brothers, parents, or even strangers, but they were all victims of an unjust system." She paused for a moment, her eyes reddening. Then she continued, "When George Floyd cried out, 'I can't breathe,' it wasn't just the plea of one man. It was the cry of millions of black people across this country, struggling to survive in a society that constantly weighs them down. And today, I want to say this: we cannot remain silent anymore. We must face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." Amanda's voice grew stronger with each word. "I don't demand pity, I demand the truth. Skin color does not define human dignity, but it defines how this system treats us. I owe this to my father, who sacrificed his life fighting for our rights. And I owe this to all the children of the future who deserve to live in a world free of discrimination." As she concluded her speech, the entire square fell into absolute silence. After a few seconds, a single clap broke the quiet, followed by waves of applause spreading through the crowd. Many wiped away tears, while others raised clenched fists high, the symbol of strength and unity. Immediately after the memorial, a group of young black activists led a peaceful protest march around the town. They carried banners, chanting slogans, "No justice, no peace." Hundreds of Oakidge residents joined in, from the elderly to children, all marching together to demand transparency and fairness. Jake stood on the sidelines, jotting notes and taking photos. He watched as Amanda led the protest, holding a banner with the words, "Truth shall set you free." Her gaze was resolute, her face radiating a powerful energy. Jake felt a deep sense of respect, but also a hint of worry. He knew these actions wouldn't just change Oakidge, they would provoke strong reactions from conservatives. Meanwhile, Dan Harlow stood far away, watching the procession pass by with fear in his eyes. He knew the peaceful era he once took pride in was crumbling. But there was nothing he could do except watch as everything he once believed in became a burden. That evening, Amanda and Jake met at the corner cafe to discuss what had happened. Amanda was still exhilarated by the community's support, but she was also aware that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. "They'll fight back," Amanda said, her tone growing somber. "The conservatives will call us destroyers of tradition, accuse us of trying to erase history." Jake nodded. "That's true. But history isn't an excuse to justify injustice. If we don't confront the past, we'll forever be trapped in it." Amanda gave a faint smile. "You're right. But I need you by my side. Not just to write articles, but to help me stay grounded in my beliefs." Jake took her hand, his eyes sincere. "I'm not going anywhere." Their conversation stretched late into the night. As they left the cafe, Amanda and Jake saw the ancient oak tree outside the police station. Beneath the dim streetlights, the tree appeared both majestic and ominous, a witness to a painful history. Amanda whispered, "We will make it a symbol of hope, not pain." Jake nodded, "We will make it happen." The two walked away in silence, but within them, the flame of truth and justice still burned brightly. They knew that no matter how difficult the challenges ahead, they would never bow their heads. The next morning, Amanda returned to the Oakidge police station with a team of federal agents to continue their investigation. This time, they were granted access to a secret archive located in the basement of the building. This was where forgotten or deliberately concealed files had been stored for decades. Amanda descended the narrow staircase leading to the basement, her flashlight illuminating dusty bookshelves. The air was heavy and damp, as if everything had been abandoned long ago. She flipped through stacks of yellow documents, her eyes scanning each page intently. Suddenly, she froze when she spotted a brown envelope with hastily scribbled handwriting. "Stokes case, 1965. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a collection of photos showing her father's body hanging from the ancient oak tree, along with detailed reports about the case. But what shocked her most was a list of names of those involved, including Daniel Harlow, who at the time was just a young officer but clearly played a role in covering up evidence. Amanda felt her heart stop. She called out loudly, "Everyone! I found it!" The two agents rushed over, examining the documents she had uncovered. One of them said, "This is undeniable evidence. We need to report this to our superiors immediately." Amanda clutched the documents tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. She whispered, "Dad, I finally uncovered the truth." In his office, Dan Harlow sat hunched on his chair, his head buried in his hands in despair. He had just learned that Amanda had uncovered the 1965 case file. He knew there was no way to hide the truth anymore. "Why did I do it?" Dan asked himself in anguish. He recalled that day when he was still an ambitious young officer. Back then, Oakidge was in chaos due to protests demanding equality. Amanda's father, a prominent civil rights activist, had become a target for an extremist group. Dan hadn't directly participated in the murder, but he had helped the group erase all traces to protect the reputation of the police force. He burst into tears as the image of Amanda's father being lynched replayed in his mind. It was a haunting memory he had never dared to confront. "I was wrong," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. But now it was too late to undo his mistakes. He knew that if the truth came out, not only his career but his entire life would collapse. As news of the 1965 case began to spread, Oakidge fell into turmoil. White conservatives organized emergency meetings to discuss ways to prevent the information from going public. They feared that exposing the truth would permanently tarnish the town's image. However, the younger black generation refused to stay silent. They organized more protests, marching through the streets chanting, "Truth shall set us free." Some even set up tents outside the police station, demanding Daniel Harlow's immediate resignation. Jake Thompson wrote his first article about the case, published in a reputable national newspaper. The piece quickly caught the public's attention, drawing reporters from major cities to Oakidge. The once peaceful town had now become the center of national attention. While the town was in upheaval, Amanda faced immense pressure from her superiors. An emergency meeting was held at the Federal Inspectorate headquarters where Amanda was summoned to explain the progress of her investigation. "You understand that if this case goes public, it will cause a massive storm," her superior said, his tone grave. "We don't want to incite racial conflict nationwide." Amanda stood firm, her voice calm. "I'm not doing this to provoke conflict. I'm doing it for justice. If we don't confront the past, we'll never achieve true reconciliation." Her superior sighed. "But have you considered the consequences? This town could be divided forever." Amanda looked him straight in the eye. "If we remain silent, there will never be true reconciliation. I don't demand pity, I demand the truth." That evening, Amanda went alone to the ancient oak tree outside the police station. She stood beneath its branches, gazing up at the starry night sky. A gentle breeze rustled the old leaves. She placed her hand on the tree trunk, where her father's death had once occurred. In her heart, feelings of anger and sorrow remained, but alongside them was a newfound hope. She whispered, "Dad, I won't let them repeat this mistake. I'll turn this oak tree into a symbol of truth and justice." From afar, Jake watched her silently. He didn't want to disturb her, but he knew Amanda was carrying a tremendous responsibility. He silently vowed to himself that, no matter how difficult it got, he would always stand by her side. The oak tree still stood tall, a witness to history and a beacon of hope for the future. Early the next morning, Amanda woke up earlier than usual. She sat by the window of her small apartment holding the silver bracelet her father had given her. The engraved words, "Truth shall set you free," gleamed under the morning sunlight. Every time she felt overwhelmed or anxious, this bracelet reminded her why she had started this fight. She recalled her father's words, "We fight not for revenge, but so that future generations won't have to cry because of their skin color." Those words burned like a small flame in her heart, fueling her determination to face every challenge ahead. Amanda took a deep breath, then stood up. Today was the day she would confront the greatest pressure yet from her superiors, a tense meeting to decide whether the 1965 case would be made public. She knew this wasn't just her battle, it was an opportunity for Oakidge to face its past and build a better future. At the Federal Inspectorate headquarters, Amanda entered the conference room with a confident but tense demeanor. The large room had a long rectangular table, where high-ranking officials sat solemnly. Some appeared cold and distant, while others looked at her with concern. The meeting was chaired by a middle-aged director with a stern appearance. He began in a calm but authoritative tone. "Inspector Stokes, we've carefully reviewed the documents you provided. This is a serious matter, and if it goes public, it will have significant consequences." Amanda nodded, her voice steady. "I understand that, sir. But if we continue to conceal the truth, there will never be true reconciliation. The people of Oakidge need to know what happened." Another official interjected, his voice sharp. "Do you realize the consequences? This town could be permanently divided. We don't want to incite racial conflict nationwide." Amanda tightened her grip, trying to suppress her emotions. She responded firmly, "If we remain silent, there will never be true reconciliation. I don't demand pity, I demand the truth. Skin color doesn't define human dignity, but it defines how this system treats us." The room fell into silence. All eyes were on Amanda. Finally, the chairperson spoke. "We'll carefully consider before making a final decision. Be prepared for any scenario." After the meeting, Amanda met Jake at the corner cafe. He had written a new article based on the documents she had provided. The piece not only addressed the 1965 case but also analyzed the systemic racism still present in modern society. "The article will be published tomorrow morning," Jake announced, his voice filled with excitement. "I think it'll create a big impact." Amanda gave a faint smile, but her eyes still revealed worry. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Jake took her hand, his gaze sincere. "We can't change the past, but we can change how people perceive it. That's the only way to move forward." Amanda felt a little relief in her heart. She knew that, no matter how difficult it got, she wasn't alone in this fight. Meanwhile, Daniel Harlow experienced the darkest hours of his life. After the 1965 case was exposed, he became the center of criticism in the entire town. Many white residents who once respected him now turned their backs. They organized protests demanding his immediate resignation. One afternoon, Dan stood by the window of his office, looking down at the central square. Hundreds of people were marching, chanting slogans, "No justice, no peace." He felt as though the world was crumbling beneath his feet. "I was wrong," Dan whispered, tears streaming down his face. But he knew that even if he admitted his mistakes, it wouldn't change anything. The past had become an indelible stain on his life. That evening, Amanda and Jake went together to the ancient oak tree. Under the dim streetlights, the tree appeared both majestic and serene, a witness to a painful history but also a symbol of hope. Amanda placed her hand on the trunk, whispering, "Dad, I won't let them repeat this mistake. I'll turn this oak tree into a symbol of truth and justice." Jake stood beside her, his eyes filled with resolve. "We'll make it happen, Amanda. We'll make people understand that the truth isn't the enemy. It's the path to reconciliation." The oak tree still stood tall, a reminder that no matter how painful the past, the future always holds the possibility for redemption. The next morning, a public meeting was held at the town hall in Oakidge. For the first time in the town's history, residents from all walks of life gathered to discuss racial discrimination. The hall was packed with people, from elderly folks sitting on folding chairs to young black activists standing along the walls. The atmosphere was tense but charged with emotion. Amanda sat in the front row accompanied by Jake and the team of federal agents. She wore a formal black suit, the silver bracelet still gleaming around her neck. When she stepped up to the podium, the entire hall fell silent. Her voice rang out clearly and powerfully. "Today, we're not just talking about the past, we're talking about the future. We can't build peace without confronting the truth." She presented detailed information about the 1965 case, along with the documents and evidence they had uncovered. Every word she spoke felt like a knife piercing the pride of the conservatives, but it also served as a beacon of hope for those who had been oppressed. Not everyone was ready to accept the truth. Some white conservative residents stood up in protest, shouting and criticizing Amanda. They called her a destroyer of traditions, accusing her of trying to erase the town's history. One elderly man even shouted, "Don't let her brainwash you. This town has existed for hundreds of years without needing change." Voices of dissent filled the hall, creating chaos. Jake scribbled notes quickly, his eyes revealing worry. He knew his next article would be a challenge, balancing the exposure of the truth with avoiding further conflict. However, the younger black generation refused to back down. An 18-year-old girl stood up, her voice trembling but resolute. "We don't want revenge. We want justice. If you're not ready to face the past, there will never be true reconciliation." Her declaration received enthusiastic support from the crowd, especially the youth. They raised their fists high, chanting, "No justice, no peace." While the town was in turmoil, Daniel Harlow was officially removed from his position as police chief. He left the station with a defeated expression, carrying a small suitcase containing a few mementos. The photos and medals that once symbolized his pride now served as painful reminders of his mistakes. Dan returned to his old wooden house where he used to proudly represent the town's authority. But now the large house was filled with silence. Dust covered the furniture, and the photos of the golden age of racial segregation still hung on the walls, but they no longer brought him pride. Instead, they were haunting reminders of his unforgivable errors. Every morning, Dan woke up feeling empty. He often sat by the window, holding a cup of black coffee and listening to classic country music, the music that used to bring him joy. But now it only deepened his loneliness. He looked out at the backyard, where a small oak tree stood, and remembered the years when he confidently believed he was protecting social order. After the public meeting, Amanda returned to her apartment but couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, gazing at the starry night sky, reflecting on everything that had happened. She couldn't help but wonder, was she fighting for justice, or was she driven by personal pain? Jake called her late at night, his voice filled with concern. "Amanda, are you okay? I've just finished writing the new article. It'll spark a lot of controversy." Amanda sighed, "I know, but I can't stop now. If I give up, it's like betraying my father." Jake was silent for a moment, then said, "You're not alone. I'll always be by your side." Amanda felt a little relief in her heart. She knew that, no matter how difficult it got, she couldn't turn her back on her responsibility. The next morning, Amanda attended a meeting with a group of young black activists at the Baptist church. Together, they discussed ways to continue fighting for justice, from organizing community education programs to advocating for policy reforms. A 12-year-old boy stood up, his voice full of passion. "We don't want to live in a world of discrimination. We won't bow to injustice." The group applauded, their eyes filled with hope. Amanda looked at the boy, feeling a new source of energy flow within her. She whispered, "Dad, I won't let them repeat this mistake. I'll turn this young generation into the builders of the future." After being stripped of his position as police chief, Daniel Harlow became a pariah in the town of Oakidge. Those who once respected him now avoided him or looked at him with disdainful eyes. He was no longer the powerful chief of police, but merely an old man living in solitude in his large wooden house. The house, which had once been filled with laughter and family gatherings, now lay silent like a tomb. Dust covered the furniture, and the photographs commemorating the golden age of racial segregation still hung on the walls, but they no longer brought him pride. Instead, they served as painful reminders of unforgivable mistakes. Every morning, Dan woke up feeling empty. He often sat by the window holding a cup of black coffee and listening to classic country music, the music that used to bring him joy. But now it only deepened his loneliness. He gazed out at the backyard where a small oak tree stood and remembered the years when he confidently believed he was protecting social order. Why did I do it? Dan asked himself in despair. He recalled that day when he was still an ambitious young officer. Back then, Oakidge was in chaos due to protests demanding equality. Amanda's father, a prominent civil rights activist, had become a target for an extremist group. Dan hadn't directly participated in the murder, but he had helped the group erase all traces to protect the reputation of the police force. He burst into tears as the image of Amanda's father being lynched replayed in his mind. It was a haunting memory he had never dared to confront. "I was wrong," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. But now it was too late to undo his mistakes. He knew that admitting his guilt wouldn't change anything. The past had become an indelible stain on his life. That evening, the town of Oakidge held a second memorial for George Floyd, calling for reconciliation and unity within the community. Amanda was invited to speak, and this time she stepped onto the stage with even more confidence. She wore a formal black suit, the silver bracelet gleaming around her neck. As she began her speech, her voice trembled but was filled with emotion. "Today, I stand here not only to honor George Floyd but also to remember all those who have fallen because of the color of their skin. They may be brothers, parents, or even strangers, but they were all victims of an unjust system." She paused for a moment, her eyes reddening. Then she continued, "When George Floyd cried out, 'I can't breathe,' it wasn't just the plea of one man. It was the cry of millions of black people across this country, struggling to survive in a society that constantly weighs them down. And today, I want to say this: we cannot remain silent anymore. We must face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." Amanda's voice grew stronger with each word. "I don't demand pity, I demand the truth. Skin color doesn't define human dignity, but it defines how this system treats us. I owe this to my father, who sacrificed his life fighting for our rights. And I owe this to all the children of the future who deserve to live in a world free of discrimination." As she concluded her speech, the entire square fell into absolute silence. After a few seconds, a single clap broke the quiet, followed by waves of applause spreading through the crowd. Many wiped away tears, while others raised clenched fists high, the symbol of strength and unity. Immediately after the memorial, a group of young black activists led a peaceful protest march around the town. They carried banners, chanting slogans, "No justice, no peace." Hundreds of Oakidge residents joined in, from the elderly to children, all marching together to demand transparency and fairness. Jake stood on the sidelines, jotting notes and taking photos. He watched as Amanda led the protest, holding a banner with the words, "Truth shall set you free." Her gaze was resolute, her face radiating a powerful energy. Jake felt a deep sense of respect, but also a hint of worry. He knew these actions wouldn't just change Oakidge, they would provoke strong reactions from conservatives. Meanwhile, Dan Harlow stood far away, watching the procession pass by with fear in his eyes. He knew the peaceful era he once took pride in was crumbling. But there was nothing he could do except watch as everything he once believed in became a burden. The protest lasted late into the night. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Amanda went alone to the ancient oak tree outside the police station. She stood beneath its branches, gazing up at the starry night sky. A gentle breeze rustled the old leaves. She placed her hand on the trunk where her father's death had once occurred. In her heart, feelings of anger and sorrow remained, but alongside them was a newfound hope. She whispered, "Dad, I won't let them repeat this mistake. I'll turn this oak tree into a symbol of truth and justice." From afar, Jake watched her silently. He didn't want to disturb her, but he knew Amanda was carrying a tremendous responsibility. He silently vowed to himself that, no matter how difficult it got, he would always stand by her side. The oak tree still stood tall, a witness to history and a beacon of hope for the future. The next morning, Amanda walked into the Federal Inspectorate headquarters with a decision she had carefully considered. She knocked on her superior's door, the same person who had chaired the tense meeting days before. When invited in, she sat down across from him and said clearly, "Sir, I want to resign." Her superior was surprised. "Resign? Why? You're one of our most outstanding inspectors." Amanda gave a faint smile, but her eyes were filled with determination. "I can't continue working within this system anymore. It's too slow and often only protects the interests of the powerful. I want to use my time and abilities to help victims directly, those who suffer injustice every day." Her superior was silent for a moment, then sighed, "I understand. But are you sure about this decision?" Amanda nodded firmly. "I've never been more certain." A few weeks later, Amanda officially opened the Racial Discrimination Victims Support Center in Oakidge. This was a project she had long dreamed of, using compensation funds from the 1965 case to build and operate it. The center was located in a small house near the central square, a place that had once symbolized discrimination. On the opening day, hundreds of local residents came to attend. Inside the center, the walls were decorated with posters bearing hopeful messages: "Truth shall set you free, no justice, no peace." One corner was dedicated to displaying photographs and documents about Amanda's father, a man who had sacrificed his life for the community. Amanda stood on a small stage, holding a microphone and addressing the crowd. "Today, we're not just opening a center. We're creating a safe space for anyone who has ever been hurt by racial discrimination. This isn't a place for hatred, it's a place for healing and unity." The entire hall erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. Jake stood beside Amanda, his eyes filled with pride. He knew this was a major turning point in her life and proof of the power of belief and perseverance. A few days later, Jake published his final article about the 1965 case. The piece not only recounted the tragic story of Amanda's family, but also analyzed the impact of racism on modern society. The article quickly caught the public's attention, becoming a focal point in national newspapers. Jake contacted Amanda, asking her to give an interview to share more about her journey. But Amanda declined. She told him over the phone, "I don't want to become a symbol or a hero. I just want to focus on my work, helping those who need support." Jake respected her decision. He knew Amanda didn't want personal attention to overshadow her larger goal. While Amanda began a new chapter in her life, Daniel Harlow continued to live in solitude in his large wooden house. He no longer received any calls or visits. Days passed in silence, accompanied only by classic country music. One afternoon, he stepped out into the backyard where the small oak tree stood tall. He looked up at its branches, recalling the years gone by. Suddenly, he burst into tears as the image of Amanda's father being lynched replayed in his mind. He whispered, "I was wrong. I'm sorry," but he also knew that this belated apology couldn't change anything. All he could do was live with his regret and hope that the younger generation wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. That evening, Amanda returned to the center. She entered her small office where her father's portrait was placed. She gazed at the photo, her eyes welling up with tears but a faint smile forming on her lips. She whispered, "Dad, I've done it. I've turned that oak tree into a symbol of hope, and now I'll continue fighting for justice." She placed the silver bracelet on the desk next to her father's portrait. The engraved words, "Truth shall set you free," gleamed under the lamplight, a reminder that no matter how painful the past, the future always holds the possibility for redemption. The next morning, Jake's final article about the 1965 case and Amanda's journey appeared on the front page of a prestigious national newspaper. The bold headline read, "From the darkness of the past to the light of justice, the story of Amanda Stokes." The piece not only detailed the tragic case, but also analyzed the meaning of truth and reconciliation in modern society. Jake concluded the article with an emotional paragraph. Amanda Stokes is no hero or symbol. She's just an ordinary black woman, but with perseverance and unwavering belief in justice, she has transformed an entire town. She teaches us that the truth isn't the enemy, it's the path to reconciliation. And sometimes, to find light, we must confront the darkness. The article quickly spread on social media, garnering millions of reads and shares. Many people sent letters of support to Amanda, expressing admiration and gratitude for her courage to stand up and fight. However, Amanda remained unaware of this. She refused to read the article or respond to any interview requests. Jake Thompson. After publishing the article, Jake continued his career in journalism. He moved to a larger city to write about social issues and racial discrimination. However, he stayed in touch with Amanda through phone calls. Each time he called her, he sensed a meaningful silence on the other end. Though they never met again, Jake always regarded Amanda as his greatest source of inspiration. Dan Harlow. Dan's life grew increasingly monotonous and lonely. He spent most of his time sitting by the window, listening to classic country music and gazing out at the backyard. Occasionally, he stepped out to the small oak tree, wondering if he could ever make amends for his mistakes. One afternoon, he wrote a letter of apology to Amanda's family but never sent it. The letter remained in his desk drawer, a belated confession. The town of Oakidge. After the upheaval, Oakidge gradually began to change. Protests continued, but without violence. Classes on history and social justice were introduced in schools, helping the younger generation better understand the past. Some white residents began participating in community activities alongside black neighbors, creating new relationships based on respect and unity. One beautiful morning, Amanda stood in front of the support center, watching a stream of people arrive for a seminar on social justice. She wore a formal black suit, the silver bracelet still gleaming around her neck. As she stepped onto the stage, she looked down at the crowd with hopeful eyes. She began her speech. Today, I want to talk about reconciliation. Not the kind of reconciliation we merely speak about, but the kind that starts with the truth. We can't build a future without acknowledging the past. But more importantly, we must ensure that future generations won't have to cry because of the color of their skin. The entire hall erupted in applause. A 10-year-old boy stood up, raised his fist high, and shouted, "No justice, no peace." The entire crowd echoed his words, creating an atmosphere charged with positive energy. After the seminar ended, Amanda stepped outside where the ancient oak tree still stood tall. She placed her hand on its trunk, feeling its strength. In her heart, her belief in the future grew stronger with each passing day. That evening, Amanda returned to her small office. She sat by the window, gazing at the starry night sky. On her desk, her father's portrait and the silver bracelet lay side by side like two symbols of faith and hope. She whispered, "Dad, I've done it. I've turned that oak tree into a symbol of hope. And now, I'll continue fighting for justice." Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jake. "The article's been published. People are sharing it widely. You're extraordinary." Amanda gave a faint smile but didn't reply. Instead, she picked up her father's portrait, looked into his kind eyes, and thought silently, "I owe you everything." She placed the portrait back down, drew the curtain closed, and lay down on her bed. The lights dimmed, but in Amanda's heart, the flame of truth and justice still burned brightly.